Hi, this is Joe and welcome back to the shop. A while back I purchased a Harbor Freight media blast cabinet, the small one, not the big one. And I used it initially in restoring an old Harbor Freight vise that I had. So I put the vise in the various parts of the vise in the blast cabinet and blasted it, and it worked really nicely in removing all of the old paint and crud off the vise. So then I had another project I was working on. I was blasting an old outdoor gas stove, and some of the components were pretty cruddy and greasy, so I put that in the cabinet and started blasting that, and I absolutely had zero luck with getting the media to come out at all. So I went as any normal person would and did some searching on YouTube for various solutions on what's going on. And again, there was all kinds of things. Your media has gotten wet. The nozzle, as in right here, that Harbor Freight provides, is not very good. And if you notice here, there's a pickup tube, and apparently I've heard some people say that's no good. So I decided, instead of just blindly trying different things, I was going to do some research. So what I have here is I have the blast media gun that came with the blast cabinet. I have all the hosing and the pickup tube. Again, that was supplied by Harbor Freight. And then what I have over here off to the left is I have a carburetor synchronizer, and it basically measures units of vacuum that are pulled off of the hose that normally is connected up to a carburetor, and it's used to balance dual or multiple carbs. So what I have here is I'm going to use this as a comparison here to try to find out what kind of vacuum I'm pulling, and then try some various different solutions to see if I can find out what the problem is. I even went out and bought a third-party Campbell Housefield blast gun, and I was going to try some different experiments. So let me show you what I've run across here. So let me zoom in on the carb synchronizer, and then I'll run the run the siphon gun, and we'll pull a vacuum across the pickup tube, and let's see what kind of a reading that we're going to get. So let me reposition the camera here. I've calibrated the carb synchronizer according to the manufacturer specifications, and what I'm going to do now, I have just slightly off camera here, I have the gun, and I have my compressor hose attached to it, and I'm running between 80 and 90 psi, and that's what Harbor Freight recommends. So let's go ahead and pull a vacuum across the pickup tube. Okay, looking at the, we're pulling about not quite a half a unit of vacuum, and you notice it's the increments on the scale here are 0, 1, 2, and 3. So I doubt very much that's inches of mercury. I don't know, and it doesn't really matter what the reading is, but it does tell me in the current situation of the siphon tube, we're picking up just under a half a unit of vacuum. So what I did, and again, I've done all this before off camera to save you guys the trouble of putzing around. I've tried different pickups. I've tried the different gun, and let me zoom out here a little bit. And I've tried changing the siphon tube to something different. A couple of gentlemen out on YouTube custom designed their own siphon pickups, so I made one of those and tried that, and still I'm not getting a decent vacuum. So let me make some changes here. I'll show you what I'm going to do, and then let's compare the vacuum readings. Okay, what I have here is my cell phone and a Ryobi moisture tester. So I played around a little bit with this off camera, and the most sensitive setting is set to spruce. That's the greatest reading I have, so that's the most sensitive. So I have a damp sponge here that I just, wring out with some water. So let's go ahead and there's sharp probes on this sponge. So if I plug in that those probes into the damp sponge, the highest reading I can get, again, is on spruce, and as you see here, it's a 33% moisture. Okay, so that's the most sensitive setting I can come up with. So what we're going to do now, just to show you this is just to get a baseline of the measurement here. Okay, so if I take this out and dry off these probes, as you can see, it rather quickly comes back to 0% humidity. So what I'm going to do now is let's go out to where my blast cabinet is. I've had media in the blast cabinet for several months. So if it's going to be moist, it's going to be moist and damp now because it's been out in that cabinet for quite a few months. So let's reposition the camera, go out, and let's take a reading of the blast media with these same settings, and let's try to get again, some kind of a measurement if what kind of moisture content we have in the blast media. I went and got a sample of media. This is aluminum oxide. I put it in a container. It's been sitting in the blast cabinet for months. So here we have the phone. We have the Bluetooth connected. Let's go ahead and plug this into the sponge here, see what we get. We get 33%, okay, on spruce. Now let's go ahead and put this sensor in the blast media. Okay. So we're getting 8.2% humidity. So there is a little bit of moisture in this blast media. Not too much. But again, this has been sitting out for quite some time. When I did this months ago, the same test off camera, I didn't get any humidity whatsoever, and that was when I was having the issues with the siphon tube. So let's go ahead and try a few more things here. In playing around trying different things, one thing I noticed is down here on the siphon tube, even when you put the hose over, there's two tubes. There's one smaller tube running through the center of the larger tube, and as this tube comes out, the smaller tube comes out, there's a gap there. So what I did is put a piece of tape there. I've also taken some hose clamps, and I've tightened up the hose clamps from the siphon gun down through the siphon tube. Okay, so now let's move the camera. I'll do this without turning the camera off, so you know I'm not playing any funny business here. Let's move it over and let's zoom in. Okay. And let's lower this down a little bit so we can see what the heck we're doing. Again, I would normally do this off camera, but I want to show you that I'm not playing anything funny here. So now let's go ahead and let me focus this a little better so we can see what the heck is going on. Okay. Okay. Now you notice, before we were getting a little less than 0.5 on the scale here. Now that I've tightened everything up, put a piece of tape here, put some hose clamps on the fittings, and zoom back out now. We're getting right at 1 unit of vacuum. So what I figured what happened, and I went out and watched several YouTube videos of people unboxing and setting up the media blaster, and I didn't see anybody put any hose clamps over the fittings. And when I purchased the unit from Harbor Freight, there were no hose clamps as part of the accessories that came with the media blast cabinet. So I decided, oh, heck with it. Let's go ahead and try tightening up these fittings to make sure, that there were no leaks or no vacuum being vented out or sucked out. So as you see, the after securing all the fittings and taping all of the siphon tube and everything, the vacuum went up over 50% from where it originally was. So here's what I think happened. When I first purchased the media blast cabinet and put it together as it came, from out of the box from Harbor Freight, all the hose fittings were tight. So I was getting good vacuum. But as you know, working in a blast cabinet, if you've ever done it, if you haven't, you're always moving that nozzle. Let me zoom out here. You're always moving that nozzle around in different positions. You're twisting because you're trying to blast around whatever device. In my case, I was blasting vice components. So as you're blasting over time, these hose fittings the hose is going to start stretching out a bit. So what I think happened is over time that hose became loose on the fittings, and as a result it started to suck a little air in through the fittings, and that's what decreased the vacuum on the unit, and then it made it so that I couldn't get any pick up any siphon, any media out of the bottom of the cabinet at all. So now that I tightened all this up, the vacuum reading is much nicer. So what I'm going to go do now is take and put the unit back in the blast cabinet, and then we'll do a test blast, and we'll determine if that's going to improve any of the siphoning action of this siphon gun. I've put the siphon gun and the siphon back in the blast media cabinet. I have a piece of rusty square tube here. I'm going to go ahead and shut this up and we'll try to do some blasting. You won't be able to see what's going on until after my next modification, but then I'll show you. You'll be able to actually see inside. I'm putting some type of a filtration system in. But let's go ahead and get this set up, do some blasting, and I'll show you the results. Okay, I did some blasting. Let's open up the cabinet door here and see what we got. Okay, there's one rusty side, and there is another side. There's another rusty side, but just a few minutes I was able to remove the rust off of one side of the square tube. So I'm rather impressed. This is since doing the vise and then not being able to use the blast cabinet because I was getting, again, leaks in the siphon hose. It's now working quite nice again. Another thing that I did in an earlier video, I built an air dryer, or I purchased an air dryer and mounted it to the blast cabinet. So now any air coming from the compressor is going to go through a drying agent, a desiccant, and then comes in through the inlet, the hose inlet, into the siphon gun. So my air is dry, and this is the same media. So you noticed it was 8.2% moisture, but yet it's still blasted quite nice. So it looks like my enhancements of adding the hose clamps and sealing the two-part siphon tube with a piece of tape seem to work quite nicely. So hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more. I'm going to put some type of a filtration unit so that as you're blasting, it's going to suck the fine particulate out of the air and remove that so you can see while you're looking through the blast cabinet, the plexiglass screen there. So again, hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.